Bato! How's it going? I gotta make some new emotes too. Those are older. So I gotta get you guys some new ones. I'm doing well, and hey, I'm glad you're practicing line art. I would highly recommend practicing with a brush of some kind, either a brush pen or a small, like, round watercolor brush or something. It just, like, I think it just gives you a sense of line quality and forces you to kind of have a certain amount of control that other things might not. And it does translate over to digital pretty well as far as like the amount of control that you can learn. Trying to think of her colors. Quinn is gonna have kind of a yellow vest. I don't know what color top I want her to have. Maybe she'll have a magenta top. I'm okay with that. Whoops, let's go on the right layer. How about that? This is the Black Sails soundtrack. It's always a challenge to find, you know, something that won't just get muted automatically later, which is, you know, sometimes I don't mind, but it's annoying if they mute part of it when I'm like talking, at least if I'm saying something of value. That gets kind of annoying because I like to save the videos out to YouTube and stuff, so I have found that they don't tend to mute this soundtrack. I don't know why, but they don't, so I'm okay with it. Let's see here. Let's get into a bit of gray-ish. Gray-ish. Yeah, I mean, you know, I get it if, especially on Twitch, you know, where people might be making money on videos. I get that they don't want to be like, sure, just use our music for free, even though you're getting paid. You know, it's annoying, but I get it. Let's see. Hello. What kind of stuff are you drawing to practice your line art? Oh yeah, I see. So I mean, you're really practicing kind of more accuracy, I guess, in mark making. Don't worry, I've done that exercise a lot. Did that for a class back when I was at Art Center. We would do that, and we would practice our ellipses. It's a good exercise, I think. Actually pretty valuable. What we would do is we would have, we'd make the 2 dots, usually one on either side of the page, and then, right, we'd practice our lines. We'd space the lines out maybe about, half an inch or 3/4 of an inch or so, just eyeballing. And then in between the lines, we would do ellipses and circles that had to fit like perfectly between the lines, so that you could work on control of that and didn't just rely on like, haphazard sort of like ellipses. It's like it was controlled. So yeah, it was definitely helpful. And you can still do that exercise with a brush, by the way. The lines and ellipses. And again, it just helps you with control. Do I do warm-ups before I start? It depends. If I'm just painting digitally, I don't worry about warm-ups. At least when I'm doing my own stuff. Because, you know, the painting, it's a little different act. It doesn't have to be so precise, or it's precise in a different way. Where you can kind of push and pull forms back and forth, so it doesn't always require warming up. The warming up is still, it's a good practice to get into, and I still do quite a bit of warm-ups, but more so if I'm going to be drawing, like for work or something. That's really when I'll do some warming up, because I need to. You know, the stuff for work needs to be more precise. It's just got to be a little cleaner, I guess. But so a lot of the stuff that you see on Instagram, I mean, lately not so much, but pre-quarantine, most of that stuff was actually done as warm-ups before work. And, you know, I take my time to do them right, because there's a process, especially when I'm doing the pencil sketching for work, right, with the Prismacolors. There's a whole process there, and I need to kind of warm up on every step of the process. So from blocking a sketch in, to doing the cleaner line work finish, to doing the tone on the back, and then the final cleanup on the front. You know, it is a process, and I need to make sure that I'm kind of warmed up on the entire process. So so I do tend to do a bit of that, and, you know, make sure I'm doing it right. Just wanted to color pick that. I should make a swatch really for these if I want to get the colors like super accurate. But I haven't yet. But yeah, I mean, warming up is a good thing to do, because it really does take, I mean, it can take sometimes a couple hours to really get warmed up. Now for work, of course, I don't always have that much time, but I still, you know, am aware that if I spend an hour and a half or so warming up in the morning, I'm going to end up with much better work in the day and more efficient work in the day than if I were to just go in cold, right? Because I have to get a likeness and stuff like that for work when I'm sketching. And I've made the mistake a couple times of thinking like, oh no, we've got too much to do. I can't take the time to do a warm-up. And then that first sketch, which should take me an hour and a half, has taken me like 3 hours to do, because I keep having to like try and correct the likeness and try and correct the likeness, and it just like ends up being a complete waste of time. So that's where I'm like, all right, I'm warming up from now on. Didn't realize that Indian yellow is so hot on her, so let's correct that. So yeah, and honestly, I feel like, you know, the further you go kind of as a professional, the more warming up should become part of the process. Just because you can't really, you have more at stake, you have more on the line, you know, you can't really turn in a half-assed drawing, because someone will call you out on it, either, you know, the people you're working for, or if they're answerable to clients, the clients, you know, we've had times that sketches came back from the client asking like for specific fixes on you know, like one sketch here and there, just because it's like, look, the sketches might be going to the talent, right, to the actors, and you know, you show them like a half-assed sketch of them and they're not going to be happy. So yeah, it's a good idea to make sure you're firing on all cylinders. Yes, they are warm-ups, but as I say, I take my time to do them right. You know, I'm not treating them as throwaway sketches. Like, I'm treating them very seriously. Not just because it's sort of my limited time to do something for myself, but also because the work that I have to get into afterward, you know, is serious work. It's what pays the bills. So, yeah, it's definitely you know, a little bit of a misnomer there, maybe, when I say they're warm-ups, but they really are. So, but I think most people treat warm-ups as throwaway sketches, and you can. You know, obviously, like, it's not like I kept all the pages I filled with the straight lines and ellipses, you know, and that's fine. Though even those, you don't really treat those as throwaway, like you're still taking the act very seriously, right? Because it's all about learning to do proper mark making. So Yeah, still working from home. You mean, am I still getting to work from home? Because honestly, I prefer it. I prefer working from home. I know not everyone does. Some people kind of miss going in and seeing folks, and I miss seeing some of the people at work. Honestly, I don't interact with most of the people, so I can't really say one way or the other, but I love my team there, my sketch team, illustration team, all good people, and we always have like good conversations about art, and so that's nice. But at the end of the day, I just don't miss the commute at all. That driving in LA traffic, there's just no real upside. So I don't miss it. I feel like she needs just a little more a little more detail in her structure. But mostly just here on the face, only because I kind of want to sneak like one more color in, but I don't feel like I can without a little bit more detail. It's like, it's so much easier to do, some streaming and stuff if I don't have to worry about 45 minutes or an hour to get home and all that. So it's nice if I can kind of wrap up work at 6:30. I can at least start dinner cooking or something before that and just wrap up on work, and then 6:30, call it a day, chill for like an hour, and then maybe start a live stream. And that's really kind of what I've been thinking about a lot. But no, movie poster interests have not slowed down. Really the only real factor was productions, right? Because productions had to be halted. So that was the only real kind of hit, I think, that we sort of took, is that we're dependent on productions going. But because they are starting up again, there is all that. But the other side is, they still needed advertisement for stuff online. Video games still need, like, they didn't stop. Animations didn't stop. So there was still stuff you know, coming in consistently. It was less, but it was still, you know, consistently coming in. So, you know, it wasn't that crazy. I want to correct this because that was bugging me. I don't even know if we would. Well, yeah, I guess we would see some. I feel like we're seeing too much of her tricep on this side. See here. Just want to make sure I grab the same shadow color. We're definitely gonna have to bring some like light into her face, but let's keep our process the same, and we'll hit some might give her a little more light wrapping around. So we can have a little bit of transition in there. Now I gotta color her hair clip too. Uno momento. Let's do this. So we have our. I could drag the white in like I did on the other one, but I noticed that creates a white layer that takes up the entire canvas, and it's a little harder to gauge than if I want to rescale anything, because then the bounding box goes over the entire thing. So I'm opting for not doing that. Get some of these spots we missed. Probably should have done this, and I can still go back and do this on a eye over here, and all I'm doing is getting some of that light that would be wrapping around the edges, and then I'll put the rim light on top of that. And it'll just give us like just a little bit of transition tones there, a little bit of mid-tone. So it's not just like super hot lights and shadow, but I can go back and do that. I don't know why I didn't think about that before. If I really wanted to get technical, I could think about the light that would be reflecting off the building and hitting her, but I feel like that'll just get confusing and it'll detract from the design ultimately, I think. I think it's much better to just have a pretty clear, sort of cut and dry lighting scenario, just for the purpose of the value grouping. So we gotta color that hair clip too. Don't want to forget that. Let's hit it. Let's hit it. We'll do hello. You'll notice at a certain point I do a lot of color picking from my canvas. And it's something that Harvey Dunn would say, where he would say to keep repeating your main values, basically to give your picture unity. So, and I would tend to agree. I think it helps, right? Main values and main colors. Basically pick a few key colors and keep repeating them. The composition decisions I made, you know, a lot of it kind of, I had an initial composition planned where the figures were smaller, but I was considering doing it as a diptych before, where it would be 2 horizontal A4 prints, right, which amount to 1 A3 print. But then I was like, no, we've already got 3 other prints. I don't want to keep switching things around, so I'll do it as 1 print. So I had to make the figures larger, right? Because first and foremost, I'm like, this is about the figures. But the background needs to obviously play into giving them context. So compositionally, it mostly had to do with, once I got kind of a nice sort of layout for the figures, just trying to avoid some tangents, which I mean, no matter what I do, there's going to be some tangents when I get into something like this. I just hope to avoid like really painful ones. And then I knew that I wanted that sun, that low-hanging sun, which kind of instantly dictated the lighting scenario. So, you know, there's an element of, like, I need to pay attention to that, to where the light source is, right? And I can't go crazy and just have randomly lit shit, because one, that would be probably very bad value grouping, and we want to avoid that at all costs. But within that, you know, we can take some creative license and, you know, lighten things up and darken things where we need to get a better read, right? Because if we get a better read on something and it makes the image more digestible, people will actually accept that quicker than if you were super accurate and ended up kind of making some things harder to see, harder to get a read on, right? Because in reality, if we were looking at this scene, we probably wouldn't actually, our eyes wouldn't read any detail on them, right? Meaning if they were actually like whoosh, jumping, you wouldn't be able to focus on them long enough against the sun to get any kind of detail. So we're playing up, obviously, effects that we could get in the camera, in an actual camera, right? In terms of being able to adjust exposure and maybe get some HDR, the HDR stuff. You know, where it's like multiple exposures all in one, so it's like we get to see in the light and the shadows. So compositionally, I feel like that's kind of where I landed. For me, a lot of composition does kind of depend on lighting, right? So once I have my lighting scenario, that helps me dictate the rest of the composition. And there's some elements here, not elements, but values here will change in the background a bit. I just wanted to get into the figures to get them finished so that I understand how far to go with the background, because I don't want to sit here detailing the background if it ends up not really mattering at the end. You know, you don't want to do more work than is necessary if you don't have to. But I think, you know, kind of everyone will have their own sort of priorities, I think. Or, I mean, each image will have its own priorities. Sometimes it might be more about a narrative. And so first and foremost, you have to make sure that that narrative reads, you know, and the story that you want to convey is clear. For me, I think... you know, lighting still kind of plays into that, because obviously, like, if you're trying to tell something like scary or some kind of like a mystery, and you know, who knows, then sometimes a brightly lit subject maybe doesn't do it. But they can also be an interesting challenge, right? To sort of take some tropes and turn them on their heads a bit, right? So, whoops, that's why. So like take that idea of some kind of a noir mystery or a horror scene or something, and see if you could tell it in like a high key lighting scenario. That could be kind of fun. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it is. I feel like it's always a temptation to kind of just focus on figures, and that's fine. You know, it's like a painting really should be either about figures with environment supporting them, or it should be about the environment with figures as an accent, right? So I think it all kind of depends on what your intention is, what your focus is for whatever it is you're wanting to illustrate. A little bit of light. And it's good to be clear on that. Like you should be clear on what it is you're trying to, what your intention is, what your focus is meant to be in the image, right? Because if you're not, then nobody else will be. I think intention is pretty fundamental when it comes to all of this stuff, all this art stuff that we do. Oh, that was one thing I wanted to do, right? And I didn't, because I forgot. I forgot-o. There. I like it when you do it right there. Got this little... Okay, let's do, what am I, clipping mask. Let's do a bit of rim light. First, let me make sure this hair makes sense. Don't move. I'm gonna have to finesse this a little bit. Brett, did any of that answer your question? I know I rambled on a little bit about focus and who knows what else. You know, and composition is like, it's not a super cut and dry kind of a thing, because obviously composition, it varies so much based on intention and based on, you know, just whatever it is you're illustrating. And so there isn't like one fundamental truth that will solve composition for you. It really just comes down to, like, you know, whatever the main thing is in your image, make sure it's the main thing. Make sure it reads as the main thing. And there are any number of ways you can do that. You know, so granted, that number of ways that you can do it still comes down to contrast generally of some kind, whether that's you know, contrast in values, right? Light and dark. It could be contrast in color. It could be contrast in texture, which sort of goes hand in hand with edges, right? Because you can do contrasting edges with texture, so soft edges versus hard edges. And also contrast in detail. So often the focal point of an image should be the most kind of detailed, because that is what will kind of grab our eye. But the amount of detail obviously is kind of dependent on the style that you're going for overall. I don't want this to be super even here. So all right, let's get into some rim light. I feel like this is very just going like right to white. Oh, it's not. Ah. Yeah, it it can often come down to just a lot of pushing and pulling with composition, because inevitably, you add something in, and then you're like, oh man, now this part doesn't work as well, or this doesn't read as much as I wanted it to. But I think one of the things to also recognize is that like good compositions, when you look at paintings that have really great compositions, it wasn't just like an instantaneous thing. It wasn't accidental, right? They planned it. They worked it out. And I think that's kind of one of the things that it hasn't been lost, but I feel like it isn't focused on as much, because that process of planning it out has now almost been baked into just sort of the road to the finish with digital, right? Because you can have every step of the way in one place. Like, I could have started with the thumbnail on this all at full resolution. I just have it smaller on the screen, right? Like, I could just do the thumbnail at that size on the screen, and then kind of zoom in as I'm starting to flesh things out, and you can do a color comp along the way if you want. You can do a value comp before that along the way if you want. So I think it's not as clear as it used to be, where they used to have to plan all this stuff out in different stages, and so you actually had a separate page of thumbnail, or multiple pages of thumbnails, figuring out the right basic composition for the narrative that they were trying to tell. And then you would have another couple of pages figuring out more of the details, and then you might have a couple, like several versions of possible value structures, lighting scenarios, right? And then they would pick one of those and then do maybe, a few possible color comps. Like, hey, do you like this color palette? Do you like this color palette? Do you like this color palette? Then they would pick one of those and use that as their reference to go to the final. So, in that sense, it may have been a lot more clear cut at a certain point than it is now, right? We don't have all those stages saved, even though they still tend to happen to a degree. I don't really feel like people do value comps and color comps per se, just because you can sort of change those things along the way. To a degree, and maybe within reason at least. So it's tricky. It's not really talked about, but for those really good compositions, there was a lot of either planning or a lot of back and forth. right? Where the artist was really kind of pushing and pulling and nudging things around to get the read that they wanted, right? To make sure that it was accurate to what they were envisioning. So, you know, I think that that's one thing to kind of consider and keep in mind, is that it's not an easy process, and it's not always a quick process. So it's important to not get too impatient with that stuff. Oftentimes the bulk of the time that goes into an image is actually all of that, you know. When you actually move to the finish, sometimes like that doesn't take as long as everything else combined, and that's just something to keep in mind, that most really good paintings, they're a bit of an iceberg, right? In that you're only seeing the tip of the amount of work that went into it. So you know, don't worry too much if it sort of feels like something is maybe taking time. You know, all this digital stuff has made a lot of us very impatient, you know. I mean, myself included, you know. I was never a terribly patient artist. I just wasn't. And that was something that I've had to kind of learn. And more than anything, I've had to learn to really enjoy it. You know, even when I was oil painting, like, I was not good at doing multiple sittings on a painting at all. I was like, ugh, if I can't finish this in like a day, maybe two, then I'm over it. You know, now that's not the case. I think I've learned to enjoy it through the process of just ending up at a stronger image. But I had to learn how to do that too, because part of the problem was that when I would spend multiple days on a piece, it didn't end up better, because I didn't know how to handle that time. So, you know, this whole thing is a learning process at the end of the day. It really is. It's not easy. I want to get some of these, gotta get the little flyaways. Honestly, you can simplify the shit out of hair. If you just get some of the flyaways. Of course, in hair like this, you would have a lot of little guys going on. If you get those, then you can get away with quite a bit of simplification. And you know, it's also the tough part. Like these days, obviously not. I mean, most people can't afford to go to, like, you know, a good art school. But the other side is, it's not entirely necessary. There's so much knowledge online. But the other side is, you don't have then like a structured curriculum that can make sure that you get into all the necessary steps to create a final image, right? If you don't have that structured curriculum, there's no one to say, okay, look, we need to make sure that you cover basic color theory and understand, you know, triadic harmonies and you know, all that complementary colors and simultaneous contrast and all these all these things about just like understanding color harmony, you know, and then someone to make sure that you understand how to structure those in one place and not make it either get muddy or completely chaotic, and then someone to make sure that you understand composition, in that composition is just generally a very simple thing. That's why it's best to figure out your compositions in a thumbnail, because that's your instant read, right? I think it was Howard Pyle. What did he say? A thumbnail should kill in like 1 minute at 30 paces or something like that, at 30 feet. Something like that, basically saying in 1 minute you should be able to get a composition that is clear from 30 feet away, you know. And so that's one of the things to kind of bear in mind, is that compositions shouldn't be terribly complex. That's not to say you don't have detail in your image. It's just the value structure of your composition in black and white, essentially like two values, should be a clear and fairly simple read. And it's best when you're doing those simple things to work. I think it's fine to work in like 3 or 4 values, right? Because you want to kind of, I think it's good to get your shadows, midtones, and lights in there. But you know, it's not, unless you have someone to kind of give you that information, you know, there's no reason that you're gonna learn it. I know some places do talk about, I think there are some things on Schoolism where they do cover thumbnails. I feel like Nathan Fowkes talks about it a bit in one of his. It might be his sketchbook class or whatever, where he like works in ink and things. I don't quite remember. But I feel like there might be you know, some kind of lacking information, because most people just want to get right into the you know, finishing process, and it's like, oh, there's a lot of shit to do before that. Sorry, these lines are starting to bug me in her hair, so you know, at some point, like, I don't know, maybe I'll do some thumbnailing and planning on a live stream or something. Like, I think that would be fun. I love in the that thumbnail of the layer, it just looks like fire. And I mean, I love thumbnailing, honestly, and it's partly because I love sketching, and that's where I used to thumbnail in pencil all the time, but I think because I wanted like more fine-tuned control or something, I never thumbnail in pencil anymore. I always thumbnail in pen. One, it's just a great way to kind of get more comfortable drawing in pen, in ink. Was just a great skill to have, simply because it's so immediate and direct, and it forces you to make very clear-cut decisions, right? And yeah, thumbnailing, I think, is just a great way to get more comfortable in a way where you don't feel like it's a big deal if you fuck up an image. You know, because it's just a little thumbnail, so who cares? It doesn't matter. It's funny, I feel like I normally wouldn't spend quite this long on the hair, but I feel like in her case it's just so much a part of her character that, even though I don't actually know what her character is, because I'm kind of making this shit up as I go, but it does feel like it's kind of crucial for her. So I want it to be almost another character in a way. So I want to get it right. Cool. Then yeah, I mean, let's do like once because I gotta finish this thing for the Kickstarter campaign, but maybe, and then I do have that other elf character that I should wrap up, but there's no reason we couldn't do a little thumbnailing almost as a warm-up at some point too. It is another really nice way to warm up, to be honest. And be productive at the same time, because you're like planning out future images, and it's just such a nice way to kind of jot down ideas, save them for later, and yeah, highly recommend. I mean, really, that's what sketchbooks are for, right? There's some correction we're gonna need to do on her eye, but I will do that in the painting. Let's get in there. Get in there. I ended up rescaling her a little bit. I scaled her up just because I was going to have them really kind of staggered, right? But I would have had to get a lot of atmosphere for it to read properly. And technically, she's the tallest one by like almost a head. And I, over here, right? IY, as we decided, named after Indian yellow. So I is technically the smallest of the three. I'm not super worried about that reading in this image, but as it was before, Manga, after Manganese Blue, she was the smallest one on here, and it was just kind of weird. It wasn't reading properly, so I scaled her up. You're right. Steve Houston does get into that. And I absolutely recommend Steve Houston's sketchbook classes. I mean, just Google Steve Houston's sketchbook and look at those things. They're like some of the most beautiful sketchbooks you will ever see. And that's another kind of misleading concept, right? Is the idea of the sketch. That it's somehow an unfinished thing, or that it's like somehow a kind of throwaway thing, or whatever. Like, I feel like sketches can absolutely be finished pieces. I love sketches. I think I even kind of talk about that. If you go onto the Kickstarter for my book, right, there's a little blurb of me talking about sketching. And like I love them. I think it's kind of the chance to see the thought process of the artist that you don't really get to see any other way. And I think, they're super valuable. And so, to treat the sketchbook with some seriousness, I think, is a really good idea. Even if you're doing thumbnails, just paying attention. again, like, I mean, everything is practice, everything is training. So even taking into consideration sometimes the composition of your page in a sketchbook, even if you're just jotting down random ideas, just paying attention to how they fall on the page, it's just one more chance to kind of practice your understanding of composition. So that's always a good thing. My love of sketches is probably why I taught a sketchbook class for a minute in at Laguna College of Art and Design. It was super fun. It just, the commute was kind of not quite worth it. But more than that, at the time I was still freelancing. Well, no, I even taught when I went full time, but I went full time 4 days a week. So because I was still teaching and I didn't really want to give it up, but then we started. I was starting to have to turn down too much work, and I was like, dude, they're not. I love the teaching, but they're not paying me enough to turn down that much work. So, dentist appointment. What? I don't have a dentist appointment. Do I? Holy shit! I better double check that. I don't remember having a dentist appointment. I feel like that one got pushed. Yeah, and actually it ended up hiring one of my students from my first semester class. I mean, she has since moved out of the state, but she was with us for a couple of years and did a great job. Right on, Brett. Yeah, thanks for joining. But yeah, you can always go back and watch them. I know it's not the same as watching live, but I don't know. You can always sit and sketch while you put them on or something. I also got to export some of them to YouTube also. Make sure they stick around. I know some people have gotten like kind of into the fact that Twitch doesn't really archive, or they make the archive like just for subscribers, which I get, especially wait, what am I doing here? Sorry, this got really dark and I misread what I was doing. Yeah, I totally get it if Twitch is a form of livelihood for someone. Like, completely makes sense. I'm not there right now because I am working full-time. I wouldn't mind doing this stuff as my livelihood, but got a ways to go. Ways to go. Shadow there, blocking that light a bit. still have some rim light on the back sides of this, but not too much. I feel like her rim light should be a little... Huh. I guess it has to do with just how dark that color is, so... Oh well. Whatevs. Yeah, if anyone has, you know, any other questions or anything, always, you know, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm always happy to talk about art. Maybe we'll just keep this stuff a little lighter. Meaning not lighter, but less hot, less intense, weaker. That's what I'm looking for. Just the lighting on the backside of the forms. Because rim light is really one of those things that is dependent on the angle of view, right? So even though technically there's no way they would be lit at a perceptibly different angle, right? Because that sun is so far away and it's such a big light source and they're so close that they would basically be lit from the same angle, but because rim light is dependent on the angle of view, you know, for the viewer, she would probably, I would have more intense, even rim light than Manga or Quinn here. Quinn wouldn't have a whole lot of rim light from our angle. So it's just some stuff to consider. Awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things that I love working with is lighting. I don't know. Shit is fun. And it does lend itself so well to kind of creating, you know, whatever kind of mood you want, if you just get the lighting right. Getting some of those little kind of details in the edges of the plating. Now that we would really be bring some of that heat into this hair a little bit. Okay, then we will get into some of those deeper shadows, like the occlusion shadows and stuff. So let's, we can keep that on. Why not? It'll help us figure it out. I tend to warm up the occlusion shadows a bit. There's something about like warmer, like darks when you get into the accented darks that I feel have more depth to them than the like the cool darks do. Feel like that's maybe a holdover from oil painting. But that's cool. Whoops, I don't want to move it. Damn it. I'm so used to hitting the move tool after a selection. I just kind of did it accidentally. And then I'll like smudge this around to kind of help with the hair texture. So let's see here. Actually, probably don't want so much of it. Whoop. Just to help give it a little more dimension there. The other thing we forgot. Can't forget that. The yeah, you can keep it. Transillumination, right? Even though it probably wouldn't really be red unless part of her ear is still like biological and has some like blood going through it, but whatever. Let's see. Yeah, I feel like a lot of that comes down to weight, right? Getting the proper weight in a in a character, and I feel like that kind of comes from. Because I'd gone to animation school originally before I went back to school for illustration. But what animation gave me was kind of an understanding of weight shift and whether the character is just standing or walking or running or doing whatever, and it gave me a bit of an understanding of like movement in the sense that, a real sense of movement in a piece for a character comes in the off balance, right? It's not, I think we're always so tempted to have them perfectly balanced, but if we want them to actually feel like they're moving, they need to be in a state of off balance in some way, even if they're still in control, right? And if you start getting them feeling too balanced, and they can feel balanced even when they're airborne, it's not going to feel right. So I feel like a lot of that really came from animation for me, because we actually had to animate them and make them move, and if it wasn't right, it didn't look right, and everybody could tell. It didn't matter how good at drawing or anything they were. They knew if the movement didn't look right, because we all know what people walking looks like. Even if we can't completely like pick out the all the details of what make it work and what make it fail. The things that make it fail, the things that make it work. We know when it's wrong. So, can't fake it. I don't know. Is this the D&D theme you use? This is a soundtrack from Black Sails, so if you use anything from the Black Sails soundtrack, then it could be. But I don't know. I'm just getting these deep darks in here, and then I'll be able to kind of bring in some lights to sort of pull out these forms a bit, because like her face has definitely gotten very dark, but I feel like once we get into the lights like we have here, which will really start getting painted on top of the lines, which reminds me, let's kick those lines down a little bit. They're starting to get a little much, and it'll give us a better idea of like what to paint and what to clarify. I mean, the fun thing is with the different cybernetic plates and shit, like there's kind of some built-in line work in a way, and that's kind of fun. 'Cause I'm a sucker for line work. Okay, let's do some of the painting and start catching some of the like different planes. Just want to correct some of these because some of them got a little sloppy. So, you know, just getting into like the different up-facing planes that would be catching some of the kind of ambient skylight and stuff, and then the downward-facing planes catching the warm light coming up that we'll have coming up from the city. Some of the light pollution, none of which will be as strong as the light coming from the sun, obviously, so it'll all be a bit more subtle. So really quick before I forget, because I saw some stuff that was a little off and was bugging me on her. Little things that I don't think anyone would really care about, but I do, so. It just didn't make sense that the tips of the hair would be darker than the other parts, so I was like, ah, details. I don't even know if you would see it in the final print or not, but I know it's there, so I gotta fix it. Okay. Cool. Now, let's grab our sky color. Hey, thanks, Bato. Thanks for joining. Yeah, hopefully I think I'll be able to get back to this tomorrow night. So I will definitely give you all a heads up. Thank you so much for joining, man. Always good. I probably won't be going for too much longer. Dinner with girlfriend, but you know, we'll keep jamming. I got to decide on her which materials I want to be a little more metallic or more, you know, just more shiny, reflective. Or if it's, I don't know, it might not be metallic. It could be some kind of some other glossy kind of a thing. But I'll have to give that some thought. So for now, let's at least knock in some of these lights for the upward facing planes. Even though some of these technically are not actually facing up, right? Like nothing on her face is facing the sky because she's looking down. But because of the plane change, there would be some kind of value shift. At least a subtle one. So we are getting that in there. Yeah. Okay. Feel like get into some of these. Not super loving the shape of that. So this is all just kind of knowing that the upward facing planes would be catching, you know, light from the sky, from the like the ambient light from the sky. And I know that the sky above them is definitely cooler, which is why I'm grabbing it from that kind of, you know, bluish lavender and just throwing it onto the upward facing planes. We'll bring some warmer tones in as well. Now where I has the kind of windbreaker material, I may heat up, like punch up some of the highlights to play up that sort of nylon sort of vibe. Hers, I think, is Mango's is not nylon, so it won't have such sharp or extreme highlights. It'll actually be much more subtle. Just kind of keep it a bit more matte. I'll probably play up, well, not probably. I am going to play up some of the highlights on some of these forms once I decide which ones I want to be, you know, those kinds of materials that might catch a little more sheen. Maybe might be the lighter of the three values. I think might be a fun one to kind of play up. Some of that. The only thing I wish Procreate would also log is when you zoom in and out. So I wish the time lapse would actually zoom in, because otherwise it's like you're working on these tiny little details, and in the time lapse, like you can't see shit. So unless you want to get into like editing the video in a way where okay, you zoom in on this portion and zoom back out and blah blah blah. Does anyone have any questions or topics they want to discuss? I'm up for anything. It doesn't have to be art related, but it can be. Could be cocktail related. I love cocktails. Food, cooking. Anything really. Storytelling. Storytelling is always a fun topic. I'm not like any kind of authority on storytelling, you know. I have my thoughts and ideas on it, but oh man, we went, this was a couple of years ago now. We'd gone to Venice, of course, like, gotta go there once, right? And unfortunately, I don't really think there's much to do there, but I will say I loved walking around and doing some painting, because that city is absolutely gorgeous and needs to be painted. But we did have some amazing food there, because my girlfriend always does a crazy amount of research before we go anywhere, and she always finds like just the best places to eat, and I mean, it was delicious. We went to this little place, I forget what it was called, but it only seats, I think, 12 people. Yeah, I think they could only seat 12 people, and you could either be seated at 7 p.m. or 9 p.m. Those are the only two seatings they had. And it was all basically like farm to table, so they had a farm, I think, over on the mainland. And it was absolutely delicious. Including their own like organic prosecco that they started us off with, and it was so good, so good. Yeah, we're big foodies everywhere we go. One of the reasons like we love going to France, mostly to Baynec, to the Dordogne River Valley, because they have just delicious food there. It's like foie gras and truffle central, so hard to go wrong. Hard to go wrong. It is absolutely delicious. Let's get. I need. I should be getting some warm lights on this, not really cool lights. I'm breaking my own lighting rules. So let's get, it's gotta be kind of a darker warm light. I don't want it to be anywhere near that. We also went, we went to the Caribbean. Oh my god, the ceviche. Ooh, so good. So good. Same when we went to Tahiti last year, and they don't do a ceviche, they do a poisson cru, is what they call it. It's similar, but it's not spicy. It's the only thing with Tahiti. Tahitians don't eat spicy food for some reason. They're missing out. We love spicy food. I'm half Indian, so go figure. I grew up on curry. Just catching some warm lights on the bottom planes of the forms. And I will say, Italy does make the best vermouths. Can't do the Aperol though. Not a fan. I think there's like a million things better than Aperol. But of course, when I was there, I had to have an Aperol spritz just to have it. But otherwise, really, if I'm gonna go the Italian route, I stick with the Negroni, because that shit's delicious. I feel like we need to get... I'm gonna have to get in there and figure out her eyes a bit. Yeah, they're just, I mean, partly the color is just a little too hectic for me. It's hard for me to want to drink something that looks that radioactive. Even though I'm fine with green chartreuse. But like, I prefer Campari to Aperol, personally. Aperol is just a little too cloying for me. But I do like Campari. I'm a fan. My girlfriend hates Campari. The other one actually that I prefer to Campari is Cappelletti. I think Cappelletti is better, and it, I think, is a much more interesting alternative to Campari or Aperol. Still has that like crazy red color, but I believe it's distilled from wine, so it has a little different flavor. Not quite as bitter as Campari, and the sweet goes a little more toward almost a chocolatey wine sweet. So it's good. I recommend Cappelletti for anyone that is interested in a bitter aperitivo. Mojitos are good. A good mojito is pretty rad. If you like a mojito, I would recommend a tea punch. I would recommend trying a tea punch. You could even throw some mint in there if you want. But tea punch is basically like a Caribbean old-fashioned. If you haven't had it, you should. It's made with rum agricole, so the French style of rum, distilled from sugarcane rather than molasses, so it's so much better than like Captain Morgan's or like any of... I know that like the molasses rums are you know, very traditional in some areas and people like them, but holy crap, talk about a hangover. Whereas the rum agricole, nowhere near that kind of a hangover, and only if you drink a lot of it, because it's distilled directly from the sugarcane, so it has more of a natural kind of grassy flavor, as well as the sweetness from the sugar, obviously, but it's delicious. So a tea punch is just like sugar, squeeze, just like take some lime wedges, and the more lime wedges the better. Do like a teaspoon of sugar. I use like a cane sugar because I like to keep that natural flavor. And you just squeeze like 5 or 6 lime wedges there. Just stir it up so that that sugar melts. Put 2 shots of rum agricole. Put some ice, and it's delicious. Simplest drink, and probably my favorite cocktail. I was just telling my girlfriend, if I had to drink one cocktail for the rest of my life, I think it would be a tea punch. There's just something about those things that just make me so happy. Bringing in some of that. That's kind of fun. I'm kind of liking this almost like slight rainbow color shift that's happening on the darker plates. I think we might play that up a little bit, like it's some sort of a fiber optic kind of material. I think that could be something fun to play with there, but not like, I don't want to go too crazy with it, but I think we might have to explore that a little bit. And you can find the rum agricole either from the Caribbean or from Tahiti, because they a few years back, I guess, they brought in like a master distiller from the Caribbean, so someone that specialized in the French style of rum, because Tahiti used to produce a lot of rum, and then for some reason they kind of stopped for a while, and they've recently gotten back to doing that, and they have all this beautiful sugarcane there, some heirloom sugarcane too, so some like original Polynesian sugarcane still, and they're distilling from there. And it's interesting because the Tahitian rum tastes very different than the Caribbean rum. Like, if you make me a tea punch with Tahitian rum and one with Caribbean rum, I'll easily be able to pick out the difference. Even though the process they're using is the same, it's just, you know, different oceans, different winds, playing into the aging factor, and just different sugarcane. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's fun. It's fun. Fun. I'm digging her. What time is it? 4:18. Cool. I'm gonna get into... I want to clean up like some of these. I want to make some of these lines a little tighter, right? So like some of these things just got a little too heavy, too thick. I don't want it. I don't want that. catch some of these edges. Especially the stuff that's a little more metallic looking. I want to make sure that we kind of reinforce that with some of those edge highlights. Let's figure out her eyes a bit. Just losing some of the detail in there that I don't want to lose. Like that should be a little warmer. plantation rum. I think, isn't plantation rum still done from molasses? Or is it... Because there's another one that's from Haiti, and they have their own way of making rum, and that stuff's hectic. I have a bottle of it, and I'm like, okay, there's got to be a way to use this, but it's like, it's so kind of funky, and I mean, it tastes like you're just drinking like alcohol and grass, and it's so weird, but it's such an interesting taste, and I'm like, no, there's got to be something I can do with this. I just haven't figured it out yet. But it's like, it's a very unique flavor. And I do like the funkiness of it. I'm wondering if I should try a tea punch with it. It might be kind of interesting. But I'm not sure. Because I know the Haitian rum is also, it's similar to the agricole, where it's done directly from the sugarcane. But just ends up with a very, very different flavor. I'm trying to figure out what color I want, like, the light in her eyes to be, and I feel like it would be reflecting the city, so it'd probably be something fairly warm, which is fine. Might help to reinforce the warm underplanes. We get some like warm highlights going. Eyebrows a little, or they'll get kind of lost. Nah, I think we might go darker. Darker! Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna need to call it for today pretty quick here. Dinner with girlfriend. We went to the Arboretum yesterday, which was super nice. According to my phone, I did about 4 miles of walking, which was awesome. It's always a good thing. We saw lots of peacocks, including some little babies, and they were cute. Of course, also had a glass of what ended up being kind of shitty wine. And ended up feeling that a little bit this morning, which was wild. I have not woken up with like a headache in a very long time. I'm usually very good at my alcohol chemistry, and because I never drink till I'm like drunk. I don't like that feel, even though I love cocktails, but I really do drink them for the taste. And of course the slight buzz is fun, but I don't like being drunk. You know, being like out of control, it's not a good thing. So yeah, it was wild when I woke up this morning. I'm like, dude, I really didn't drink that much last night. But obviously, you have a glass of shitty wine and that'll do it. That will do it. Let's get her zipper there. But the Arboretum was very nice. We went to see the Plumeria Grove, because the Plumeria Grove is in bloom right now. So, and girlfriend loves plumerias. So do I. They're beautiful. Beautiful tree. And sacred in Tahiti, which is rad. We went to the Caribbean and it was covered with like the like fake plumerias where it looks like a plumeria flower and almost has similar leaves, but then it has like no smell to it, and just isn't quite as nice. And we were really bummed. Felt like such a tease. So it was nice going to Tahiti and it was real plumerias. Okay, she's looking pretty good. Alright, I really do need to wrap this up for today. But I will be back on tomorrow night. I mean, possibly earlier. It kind of depends. I've got to wait to hear back on a work assignment. It's out to the client, and we're waiting to see what the next steps are that they want to take. If we don't hear anything, I might jump on earlier, but maybe not, because I feel like as soon as we hear something, I'm going to need to get jamming on work. So not a good idea to just be like all of a sudden, oh, never mind. Sorry guys, can only stream for like 20 minutes. So let's just plan on tomorrow night, tomorrow evening. Chances are I will work on this though if I have time, even off the stream, just because I got to get it done for the campaign. But we've got plenty of other things we can work on too. So, I ain't worried. I'm digging that. I might feel like I want to lighten up her face. Ah, we reached our layer limit. Oh, I'm sure there are layers we can... simplify. Right. That do? Oh, that clips it. That might not work. Shit. I'm just looking at like, okay, where are all the normal layers that we can well, whatever. We've got one more layer we can work with for now, and then I'll have to duplicate and simplify the file, because I want an overlay. Real quick. Overlay. Is that clipping? Good. I just want to lighten her face. Just, that might be a little too much, but it still gives us, yeah, that's kind of nice. Oh, you think? Yeah. Yeah, it gives us a little more to look at there. Cool. Alright, guys. I'm out. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for, bringing up stuff to talk about. Makes it more interesting. And I will see y'all hopefully tomorrow. Hopefully you guys can join me then. So, yeah. Enjoy your Sunday night or morning or day. I don't know what time zone everyone's in. But, yeah, have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace.